Hi, good morning. Welcome to LatentView CxO Virtual Panel. I'm Taranya Suresh. I head marketing at LatentView Analytics, and I'm going to be your host today. I will be the moderator for the panel, and I have 5 very eminent guests with me. So let me first say hi to all of them and thank them. Let me start with Antonio Hidalgo, who's the founder of GrowthRight. Antonio partners with senior business executives to create new business growth and innovation opportunities, and he works across industries and has been focused in healthcare as well as travel in the past decade. Hi, Antonio. Thank you for joining us today. We also have Alok Sharma, who's the president of Caldus Consulting. Alok has a very rich CPG experience spanning a couple of decades, and he's the founder of a growth strategy advisory firm, obviously solving tough business challenges in the branding and innovation space. Thank you, Alok. Pleasure to have you with us. Next, we have Rustam Modi, who is the CEO of Vintech NM. Rustam is a pioneer technologist with over 33 years of experience in the oil and gas space, and he has over 20 patents to his name. Rustam has been in the bigger organizations and now is the CEO of Vintech. Thanks, Rustam, for joining us. We also have Raj Mathiravedu, who is the VP of Digital Solutions from Orica. Hi, Raj. Thank you for joining us from Australia. I think it's 2 a.m. your time, so I'm really grateful that you're joining us today. Raj has a diverse functional portfolio, also in the data engineering, manufacturing, M&A, sales and marketing and operations side. Thank you, Raj, for joining us. And finally, we have Dr. Satyam Priyadarshi, who's the Chief Data Scientist at Halliburton. Dr. Priyadarshi is the veteran in the big data field, and he has expertise in all aspects of the data pyramid, and he combines it with his acumen in business strategy and organization strategy. Hi, Dr. Priyadarshi Chang. Thank you for joining us. Great. So thank you all of you for joining us today. We are going to have a power-packed 60 minutes. The first 45 will be a dialogue between me and the panelists, and then we have 15 minutes for audience questions. I just want to outline how the audience questions will go. You will see a chat box in your dashboard. So please make sure you name the panelist you want to ask the question to, and then the moderator or I will make sure that I ask them that. So let me just set some context, right? First of all, thank you everyone for joining us from different parts of the globe. I really appreciate it. The next 60 minutes, we're going to be talking about the impact of the pandemic on business and industry, talk a little bit about risk mitigation and how to navigate business industry in the present landscape, right? As we adapt to the new normal. I know that word has been used very, very often, and I know some of my panelists are not very big fans of that word, but I'm just still going to make sure I use it very sparingly. So with that as the context, let me get started. My first question is a fairly basic one, but I would still really like some input on that. So a lot of the times we hear about big data and data transformation journeys, right? So Dr. Priyadarshi, from your perspective, what really does this mean?
Thanks, Taranya. Thanks for inviting me to this CxO panel. I know we'll sail through this by muting and unmuting, which will be good. People should on the audience should tell us if they are able to listen to us, because if there is a challenge, we should really address it. Now let's come to the topic that you asked on big data, digital transformation, things like that, right? You know, there are many people who would say that digital transformation is a buzzword. My comment about that is like, these are the people who don't know what digital transformation is, or they have never done it. So that they read papers and articles and don't know how to actually navigate it. But in principle, it's a well-known concept. I think those who are in oil and gas industry, they have been using digital oil fields for almost 20 years, roughly, right? So they are actually thought out of how to actually transform an industry by leveraging digital assets, right? How much is the maturity? That remains a question, but I think that the concept were very well thought out. The main important thing is, like, if you think, my definition of digital transformation is very simple. It's the change that is associated with leveraging the emerging technologies and digital and data assets across the business life cycle, right? So that you can actually transform on a continuous basis to remain competitive, right? So some people will say, oh, like oh, when we have been digitally transformed. There is no such a thing like a digitally transformed. You will be continuously transforming, because that's the value of it, right? You can take example from the data native companies, right? In my past life, I used to work for AOL. Any data that came through, we would actually figure out a way to monetize it or do something with it in the real time, so to say, right? So you are always adding more and more concept. And one simple example to understand is like, look at the recommendation engines, right? Nobody thought out what the recommendation engine would look like in 2021. But last 15 years, people have been developing. As more data comes in, you are actually generating different kind of recommendations so that you can actually increase the share of wallet, so to say, right? And that is what digital transformation is. And the big data is the foundation layer of it in terms of how you actually create value from digital transformation.
Thanks, Dr. Priyadarshi. That was really useful. Rustam, I know you have a slightly contrary maybe point of view. What are your thoughts on that?
Satyam started it very well when he talked about big data and digital transformation. And I still, one thing I'll like to say is, I still think digital transformation is overused by a lot of senior management who really don't know what they're talking about. And the reason I'm saying that is there's nothing really gets me wrapped up when I hear about a term that we're on a digital transformation journey. Okay, and you ask them what it means, and they have a blank look on you. And I think someone, for a mechanical engineer that I'm by training, summed it up quite well to me about 10, 12 years back. The digital transformation is nothing but data transformation. Okay, what you do with that information. And I think Satyam touched on it briefly, talking about other technologies. But when we talk about data transformation, what it comes down to at the end of the day is not the amount of data you have collected, which in oil and gas industry, we have been notorious for it for years and years together. We have data that comes out of everywhere, but we never figured out how to use that data and translate that into information that can be used to create value. To me, that's the bottom line of digital transformation, is what you do with that data and how do you create value for your company organization. Because end of the day is all about monetizing the value proposition. Okay, it was interesting today, just in a Wall Street Journal, I heard about New York City thinking about taxing data, because they realize that companies over there create a lot of value with the consumer data they collect, and they're thinking of taxing it, because suddenly even politicians are figuring out there's a value proposition and information. So to me, a digital transformation is nothing about taking the data and creating value from it. And how you create value is how you apply it, how you create a strategy, and at the end of the day, make money out of it. Okay. From that perspective, absolutely, it's a journey. It's never ending, because you have to continuously innovate yourself in trying to stay ahead of competition on this particular journey. And it's a long-term commitment. You just cannot stop and start something like this.
Myself, Krishnan Venkata, I've been with LatentView for close to 12 years, and I'm also the Chief Client Officer at LatentView. Let's just go back to the question specifically in terms of, I think we heard about digital transformation and about that being from the data perspective. Just wanted the rest of you guys to also pitch in terms of what you feel from that perspective. Do you agree with that thing about the digital transformation of the customer journey, part of what was just shared?
Okay, all right. Yeah, let me just build on some of the comments made earlier about the digital transformation. I think that the first wave of the digital transformation permeated the marketing function. Everyone got into it, the social media, how to reach the consumers, how to do personalization and all those kind of other things. And that has been happening in the industry for the last 3-4 years. But what a digital transformation needs to do now is to go into many different areas. The jobs that the companies are focusing on, how do we rapidly recover our revenue? How do we create a kind of a demand? How do we rebuild the operations? Whether it is supply chain, manufacturing, sales, and distribution. there are a lot of the places where digital activities will help. Digital transformation is also rewiring the companies in terms of how they think about the workplace. What does it mean in terms of working from home, working from outside, whole slew of kind of other things. And it is changing the way that the organizations are set up now. The new mantra going forward is how do we become agile and very nimble? And that won't happen with the traditional ways of how we have done it. So I think there's going to be a tremendous role for digital transformation to be happening. The danger is in using a label that no one understands. I think it has to be driven by senior leaders of the companies who have a vested interest in identifying what is the use case, showing what the impact is, and that's how you'll get the traction. There was an interesting study by McKinsey put out, which said only 25% of the companies feel that they are doing a good job of digital transformation. But what was also remarkable is that a smaller proportion of those companies feel that they are getting some return on investment. So there's a lot of activity, but not a kind of a good sense of, and is it really helping? So I think that's where you have to have the digital transformation start proving its way out.
Also, I think the current crisis has kind of changed the way the world rethinks about itself, right? And they've been thinking about. Raj, do you want to share in your viewpoints in terms of this, in terms of how things have impacted, and how do you see the digital transformation changing in the current post-COVID crisis kind of scenario?
Sure. Thanks, Krishnan. Again, I agree with some of the comments made earlier. Probably substantiate some of the points. One, we talked about data, and the other we talked about value propositions, right? So the way, for example, I work for Orica, 140 years in the industry on mining. If you think about it, the major change that we are doing in this transformation perspective is actually, we've probably heard the word a lot of times. We're going into an outside-in approach compared to an inside-out approach, which we've always been doing, right? And that is a fundamental difference, because we always had the data. We always were thinking, this is our capability. Let's go ahead and use our capability to serve the customer. But what we have done pretty much in the last 2 to 3 years, re-looking entire thing is an outside-in approach, looking at, okay, what are the customer needs? What can we be doing to satisfy those needs? And what capabilities do we need to build in? So it is more a different looking, the view itself in that case, right? So post-COVID, pre-COVID, we'll talk about it more in the panel for sure. But I would say the fundamental transformation that we have done is that going from an inside out to an outside in approach. And that changes not just technology, right? It changes your customer engagement, your financial models, it changes your business models and aspect. So it is a much more just beyond technology is what I wanted to say. With that approach of an outside in and not an inside out. And that's probably a very summarized nutshell, man.
Got it. No, thanks a lot, Raj. Antonio, the question is for you. Do you feel that some of the newer companies, right, which are like the born in the cloud, digital native companies, do they have a leg up on some of the older traditional vintage companies based on where they are into making this transition or making most of this disruption? Antonio, you're on mute, I'm guessing. So.
I think it's still on mute.
Antonio, we're not able to hear you. So we can see you are talking, but not audible. So we'll just give you a minute. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't mute myself, but somehow I was muted, but now I am muted.
Yeah, cool.
Well, thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure, and digital transformation comes with more problems than joys. And what we're doing today is living the digital transformation in the form of what will be an in-person panel, and we are suffering from. So Do native digital companies do things better than non-native digital companies when it comes to digital? In my experience, yes, they do. Yes, they do. Because that's who they are. That's who they are. They don't have to transform themselves to become digital. They are digital. Perhaps many of us have children in this panel. I'm sure that the youngest of our kids, they would not understand the concept of digital transformation. They don't need to learn to use an iPad instead of a book. They grow up with an iPad. So the concept of digital transformation for me is an invention for those who are not digital. But that side, I'm not a digital person by birth or even training. I was trained as a PhD in molecular biology, and over the years I learned my bike one by one. And what you see is that the focus on operational efficiencies that come from digital and the focus on value creation from particularly extracting value from data and commercializing has been, in my opinion, the big areas of focus. And I think Ruston Modi talked about value among others. But when you look at the response that the world is having to COVID-19, the purpose of today's panel, you see that there are both large and small organizations and individuals embracing digital in ways they didn't do before. Elderly people suddenly learning how to use a web communication tool so they can get, to see their child, their grandchildren, and the need to see their grandchildren overweighs the difficulties of learning the technology of getting there. So I think what I am seeing now, and that's certainly what I have for myself in confinement, decided that would be my new personal focus for digital transformation, is to create purposeful value. Not just commercial value as we describe it, but purposeful value. The way in which we can connect now and understand each other through digital technology is incredible. And so for me now, it's not about money or commercial value, but about purpose, driving purpose.
Antonio, can I just add a comment to your statement that really caught my attention?
Sure.
You talked about digital transformation in the modern generation is not technology, and I completely agree on it. It's only technology for people who are not born in. Once you're born into a particular technology, it's not. So for the modern generation, is for folks like us who are not born into it. We look at it as a technology. That's my only point.
Got it. I think just one part there, Ruston, to also add on to this. Do you think that in the current part, there has been a lot of holding off on budget, right? There have been slashing budgets in terms of initiatives, etc., because it's a cash conservation scenario. Do you think there is a reprioritize and invest approach that people should do from their current portfolio, or should they slash and hold and wait for some of this crisis to pan out and see how it goes?
Let me make a comment on that one, because that is very true with any kind of investment in technology. Investment in technology is not like a light switch. One day you come in, you turn it on, and it's up and running. Next day, but because of budget constraints, you cut it off and expect it to be back on whenever you feel like it. It's a long-term investment, and that's true with any technology. The key thing is to create a proper balance between the future need of a company with the current needs. And it's very tough because it's very easy to cut those things out because you don't see the benefits in the next quarter. But at the same time, if you don't invest in technology for a long term, you're not going to be around for a long time. Okay, but it's a what do you call it? It's a change of culture within an organization to believe in investing in technology and having a pipeline rich with that information, because you never know when you need it, especially in downtime. In my 40 years experience in oil and gas, the time technology is implemented or embraced is during downturn. During good times, people are too busy printing money, they want to try new things. But during downturn is when they are open to try new things. And for companies who have a rich pipeline of technology, they have a leg ahead in the industry. So just some of my previous experiences we have seen. So no, you cannot just turn on and off. You can downscale it, but you have to keep the momentum going, because if you stop doing it, the inertia develops so much that you cannot start again very quickly. So it's a long-term commitment.
Got it. Yeah.
I have to
Go ahead, Anthony. Sure.
Thank you. Russell, you're bringing me back to my old life when I was a CTO in the past, and having to deal with those short-term and long-term decisions, and it's never easy. It's never easy. I mean, I have learned to ask 2 or 3 questions. Perhaps I can share those with you to help with that, because yes, the long-term is very important, but without a present, there is no future. So there's always, you have to have that balance between keeping things afloat while thinking the long term. So in the moments of crisis, typically people have things very clear. And that's an opportunity, and I do that with my clients now, to ask ourselves things like, you know, what are today's real core sources of value, of growth, not only money and profit, but, you know, what are the sources of customer satisfaction that have built the company or the business to this point? And they're often, you know, 20–30% of all activities. And then you can ask yourself, you know, what if we stopped anything that's not this vital few? What would happen if you stop everything else? And that's often a very difficult conversation, because there's a long tail with a lot of personal interest and but if you're able to enter that conversation, you can free sufficient resources to really keep looking at the long term. It's when you don't do some of the slashing that Krishnan was talking about, you're not going to have more money coming out of the trees. If you want to keep investing in the future at the time of crisis, you have to find the money somewhere. And so this is the way in which I try and help slash activities that will preserve the today and allow investing in the future. I'm out.
Krishnan, can I build on that?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I see a lot of the clients that I work with really not dialing back completely. It's more a kind of the balance, as someone said, and they're taking more of a kind of a portfolio approach. You know, I've got so many initiatives. Which ones do I sort of maintain, and which ones do I need to get very aggressive on? The 2 areas that I see everyone, you know, dialing up with a lot of the data initiatives and analytic initiatives is, one is in the area of product innovation, because that's the thing that has built big brands, and you can't afford to slacken that off. Okay, now, yeah, you know, because the economy, people are buying cheaper alternatives and so on, but it is also giving companies kind of a clear idea about where else can they innovate. You're not going to innovate on the basis of price. So how do we create that kind of the value creation? So it is creating a kind of a pressure in terms of developing the kind of the pipeline. Now, you may not be able to execute that. You know, you may have to defer in terms of, you know, when do I exactly launch this? But you have to keep that kind of the innovation engine going within the kind of the companies. The second area where these data initiatives are going to continue multiplying like anything is, how do we predict the demand? You know, it's not about forward, backward looking. People have to look at all the signals that are happening in the marketplace. What is the right product, right place, right time? So a lot of the kind of the initiatives are really trying to solve the demand problem, okay, and, you know, leverage that.
Yeah. So Krishnan, if you're okay, if I can add a little bit of a comment on that. Yeah, a couple of comments, right? So I'm just going to go back to the point on the digital-led organization versus a digital native or a digital thing, right? Again, I've been in oil and gas before for 17 years, and now in the mining industry, traditional companies who have lasted for a long time as well. So I would like to make a statement here. You know, we have listened to a lot of this disruption of Netflix and, you know, the Kodak movement, the Blockbuster movement. I think sometimes we get taken away. It seems that the traditional companies have never lasted. It's not true, right? You have seen the likes of Halliburton, the Schlumbergers, and in the retail industry, you have seen Walmart have survived, and have adapted. So I would say, yes, there is an advantage for a digital native, but it is not always true that a traditional company can resilient and adapt to it. And I would like to use a comment from a book, Lead and Disrupt by an Harvard professor. And it's a fantastic word, the way he's put it. Nowadays in the world, in the organizations, you can't just do one thing. You have to be ambidextrous. So you have to exploit your current core portfolio, and you have to explore new growth areas. And that is how we even balance our budgeting even at this point, even in the downscale. Okay, what are we doing within the core portfolio that we are in? And what kind of cost optimization we can be doing on the exploit? But at the same time, where are we going towards that explore? And what kind of opportunities that brings us? So you can't choose one over the other. Then you will be left out with all the technology disruptions. So my point being, it doesn't need to be a digital native company. Traditional, long-term, 100 years companies can still withstand and adapt and can survive this. So that's my point.
Sounds good. No, I think that's a point well taken on that, and it's good to see the perspective, and we'll see how we have recorded all of this. So we're going to see who wins at the end of it. In 12 months, we're going to take an evaluation and see who came out right and who came out not. And I think it's important to get that perspective. So thanks for providing that. I want to very quickly go onto a different lens, which is operations, right? I know till about a couple of months back, we never had to worry about whether we will have eggs in our fridge, milk inside, soap availability, and things like that, right? Things have been disrupted, right? You can really now see the stress on supply chains across the world globally because of this. Now, in this context, there is also aspects that are going to be staying from now on based on what we have seen, like, for example, safety, health, hygiene, etc. And I'm hearing this quite significantly. Do you see that as an area of opportunity? Alok, I'm going to start with you on that. Is there an area of opportunity for organizations to reinvent themselves on the safety paradigm? As I know you work with a lot of consumer brands, so what's your sense from an operations perspective on that?
I think the key trend that is emerging is that consumers are becoming much more choiceful of what they buy, how they use it, and and how you deliver the value. So consumers are going to be thinking beyond safety. Safety is the paramount concern today, but beyond that, they still need reassurance on sustainability. They need reassurance on ethical concerns. And the supply chains will have to, start thinking about those. And they'll also have to think about the return side of it. What does it mean for returns, for reselling, for recycling? So there's a lot of operations kind of things that have to be worked out over there. And the interesting thing that is also changing is that the world is bifurcating in terms of e-commerce and the brick and mortar, which was always there, but it is becoming much more of a big weekly shop. Okay, so you're not making as many trips, you're making fewer store trips and everything. So now organizations have to figure out how to manage the assortment and inventory levels, which will be very different across the two channels. The third area that is going to start affecting the automation is really, how do we use automation in all aspects, whether it is sourcing, whether it is procurement, transportation, and warehousing. The digitization and Internet of Things will become very commonplace in a few more years, but it'll give the companies a kind of a detailed view across the entire organization, so they can better adjust the plans on a quick turnaround. People used to do the operational planning and with a very long-term cycle. Some of us remember, companies doing 3-year strategic plans. Well, that went out of fashion a long time ago. Then it went to annual plans, and then quarterly plans. Now the cadence is moving much more towards weekly plans. How do we make those kind of a quick adjustment? And the technology part of it will allow that. The third area that's going to also affect the operations is increase collaboration in different areas. So because no company has got all the scale to do everything. So even in supply chain, we are having examples of people sharing vehicles, people sharing warehouses. So they are, they are building a kind of a system-wide efficiency rather than just a kind of a efficiency that you alone own.
No, thanks, Alok, for that. Rustam, this question is for you. How do you see this from a manufacturing standpoint? Is there going to be diminished capacity in terms of with all this social distancing, the amount of employees that can be there in a floor space, etc.? How is it going to impact manufacturing in the foreseeable time? And how do you think that manufacturing will be optimized? Will it be more automated, etc.? What's your perspective on that?
I mean, that's one of the biggest challenges we are facing right now on the manufacturing front. And I can talk in terms of working for a large corporation in technology from my entire career compared to the last 9 months in a small company. The concerns are similar, but a little bit different too. Okay. For example, right now at Wintech Nanomaterials, we are a small manufacturing company. And one thing that we learned very quickly, then even if we have one person exposed to COVID-19, affects the entire facility. Yeah. Okay, so to me, the three most critical things that we focus on a daily basis is safety, safety, and safety. You cannot emphasize enough, because not only within your facility, but making sure your employees are aware that once they go home, that they carry that same culture at home too. Because even if one of the family members affected, then everybody else is affected. And one thing you cannot afford in a small organization is to be able to stop your manufacturing. Then you're basically out of business. Yep. Okay? So safety, to me, it cannot be compromised. We make a point of talking every day in the morning, every day in the second shift, every meeting, emphasize the importance of safety, because in this COVID-19 environment, you just can't do enough, okay, in terms of hygiene. That's one thing. As you move into a larger automation processes, I mean, recently we all heard about what happened to poultry, okay? The entire manufacturing production had stopped because a handful of employees were infected with COVID-19. It's a dramatic impact. It's the unknown enemy that we are fighting every day, okay? So you can have manufacturing processes, you can partition people, they don't contact each other for a 6-foot rule. All that is placed, but a lot of times it comes down to simple, basic common sense of how we interact and how we maintain our own hygiene around us so we protect the people around us, okay? So it's changing. It's changing. The entire supply chain is disrupted. Okay. In the past, we had manufacturing on on-time basis. Things would show up in the manufacturing floor on time with the customers close by. All this is completely disrupted right now, especially in the automotive industry and the aerospace industry. You name it, everywhere around us, and it's affecting everyone. But we have to be agile. We have to adapt. We have to look at both short-term and long-term, and really move forward, because we will adapt and we will start being creative again. That's just the nature of who we are.
Sure. No, absolutely. No, that's well brought out, Rustam. What I want to do is also take a pause here and also ask the attendees, if you have questions, please share that with the moderator, with the organizer panel, and they will get it out. And Kritika, just let us know when there are questions coming from the team. We will also leave about 10 minutes at the end for questions. But I want to get Satyam and Antonio's perspective around operations as well. So Satyam, first you, what's your perspective in terms of this? I know Rustam and Alok have just weighed in, but what do you think you are seeing in the industry, and what's your perspective around this?
Yeah, so as Alok said and Rustam said, right, the digital transformation in operations has been a long journey for many industries, right? Especially retail, I think they ignored the actual adoption of digital transformation 6-7 years back, and this is why we are seeing some of those challenges in the big chain retail stores, right? That they're not able to sustain the current environment. And I used to work in that space before coming to oil and gas industry, and I used to tell them that it's time for us to leverage the data, right? So any industry which keeps slowing down or not adopt the transformational aspects at a pace that is important for that industry is very critical, right? Every industry will have a different pace, but that doesn't mean that you keep slowing down, right? Like example, and Rustam will probably agree with me that oil and gas industry, after 100 years plus of being in the industry, right? We still talk about basic concepts of like who owns the data, which silo the data is in. Data quality is really bad, then how can we build models, right? So the question is, bigger industries like oil and gas, energy sector, manufacturing, they've been collecting data and not leveraging it is unsustainable and similar to retail, which didn't have which didn't have the same scale of problem. Oil and gas certainly has a much bigger scale, right? Having said that, but I can tell you in last 5 years of my journey with oil and gas, we have been dealing with this quite effectively, both internally and externally. And I can only say that things are moving in the great positive direction. I wish that we can accelerate the pace of that operational transformation to become operationally excellent. That will be very nice.
Yeah, we'll always wish for it to be faster than what it is, right? Antonio, do you want to share your perspective from the consumer goods world? Go ahead.
Sure. So a couple of areas quickly, knowing that we're beginning to run out of time. So in operations, I have seen two major areas of benefit. One has been in our ability to have fully transparent visibility of data end-to-end in the entire value chain. So not just in data pools, I think I've heard that from some of the other panelists, but actually the ability to seamlessly connect all the data from conception of ideas all the way to managing in the cycle. We have been able in the past to actually weed out a lot of cost that it was hidden, simply because we did not have visibility of data end-to-end, truly end-to-end across the value chain. And the other area where I have seen it be very effective in operations as well is in product-like management cycle. Again, the same story where you just didn't know what you were sitting on, and you could not make the right decisions because you didn't have you had isolated pockets of data. And so the ability to connect the various pieces of data together is where I have seen the most value, connecting the data more than actually going deep in any particular pool of data.
Got it.
Krishna, let me make an additional point on that.
Go ahead, Alok.
What I've seen is that a lot of the people have been connecting the data, but they're still approaching it in terms of connecting at senior levels of the organizations. What really needs to happen is the data should flow to the frontline people who are most needed to make a quick decision. Yep. And that's where I see a lot of the companies failing. They're experimenting in terms of how do we distribute the data in such a way that it is not overwhelming, but the people who can make the decision and implement it right then and there, they can have it, because it meets all the kind of requirements. How do you become agile? How do you respond to crises very quickly?
Got it. No, thanks. I think we have a couple of questions from the audience. Rustam, go ahead while I wait for the question to come in. Go ahead. You're on mute, by the way.
Yeah, what we have seen in the oil and gas business, and expanding on what Satya said earlier, is when we just looked at the data and had the data science people look at it, we didn't get much value out of it. And very soon we learned that we needed subject matter experts working along with data scientists,
yep,
eliminate noise and really dig for a goal in the data. Okay, because what we are seeing is, if you don't know what goal looks like, you don't know what you're digging for. So you need some subject matter experts working collaboratively with data scientists to come up with the value proposition of the data And that's what we talked about, the frontline expertise, people who know and make sense of information and then apply it immediately in creating value.
Got it. So Kritika, we had a couple of questions. Could you read out one of the questions for the audience, please?
Yeah, Krishnan. So the first question is how to survive and thrive in this COVID-19 era as a small and medium business firm.
Was it addressed to somebody specific or anybody can take it?
No, anybody can take it.
Can you repeat the
Okay,
question, Krishna? Can you repeat the question?
So the question was around in the current COVID scenario, what is it needed for the small and medium enterprises to survive? What is important and imperative?
Let me try to give a shot at it. Since I'm exposed to both the large organization and a small company right now, one thing that I've seen is earlier on, as you're growing the company, you cannot be one product company. You got to start focusing on diversification very quickly. Not only within the product offerings, but even within industries. It's not easiest, it's much difficult than said and done. But diversification becomes very critical. And we are seeing right now in the oil and gas industry, if you're just focused on oil and gas industry, then when the bottom falls off, guess what? Everybody goes down together. One thing that we have seen within my organization when I first came on board was to look at our fundamental technology portfolio and realize very quickly that the portfolio that we had applied across multiple industries. So we started going on a journey of using the platform technology we had developed in the field of nanotechnology, how it can be used for trucking, lumber, medicine, textile, other industries. And when you are a technology company, the values, what you call it, selling, becomes very tedious. Because nobody's going to try something new if you cannot show them the value proposition of it, unless selling a commodity. So it takes a long-term planning. It takes a lot of discipline in focusing on the right markets and not overextending your resources and yourself. Because end of the day, what comes down to is cash flow. You got to be able to survive today, go to the next frontier. But having diversification, your product offerings earlier on as you set up and as you grow becomes very critical. And one of the subtle emphasis I want to give is what I've seen is in teams that if you have diversity of knowledge within a team, that basically fuels innovation within an organization. So when I say diversity, I'm not talking about just individuals with certain background of an industry. If you really want to expand your horizon across multiple industries, you got to get diversity of knowledge within your team as you grow earlier on in the process. Okay.
Raj, go ahead.
I think Rista made a pretty good summarized for the survival mode. I think probably one thing I would like to add in that is the resilience factor. You know, these are things are happening and people are recovering pretty quickly in these difficulties. And you know, we have seen some examples. Probably you've seen in some examples in articles. You know, where farmers and florists, right, small firms, they are not able to sell, and immediately they kind of transformed and changed the mode of operation. They went and had some partnerships with, for example, some of the Malaysian firms went and had partnership with Lazada, and through their online channels, they were able to start selling the same vegetables and same florists through other channels. And that resilience is probably key for the survival mode, and not for survival for short term, but it also opens up new channels to market as well. So I would say, in addition to what Rustam said, probably having that resilience, again, to be honest, that just is not small and medium firms, it becomes a survival, and it's also for large firms as well to keep the cash flow growing for when we go into a stock, everything. So I think this resilience becomes a key factor in these conditions. So
it's a great point. Thanks, Raj. Thanks for adding that. Thanks, Rustam, for your viewpoints. I think we'll have time for another last question. And Alok and Antonio, this is for you guys from the consumer goods side of the world. how do you ensure that this digital change management happens effectively? So we all are talking about this digital change management. Alok, I'll go with you first, and then I know, Antonio, you consult and advise a lot of companies on this, so we're going to allow you to have the closing comments on that. Go ahead, Alok.
Can you just repeat that? Did you say mental change?
Sure. How do you, within consumer goods industry, how do you ensure that the digital change management or the digital transformation change is managed effectively or happens effectively?
Well, I think it all starts at the top. Okay. When you have a kind of a top leadership that is consistently engaged in creating that transformation and is communicating to its employees, that's when you start getting the cover the change management. It's not something that you can just sort of prescribe, and say, go do this. But what you have to do is to give the organization a kind of a vision of where you're going and ask for collaboration. People want to really help. So if you can get them to talk about your vision of where you're trying to go, what are the kind of the ways for digital transformation things that they can go about in implementing that helps. The other thing is, put your money where your mouth is. Okay, if you're going to talk about digital transformation, you can't sort of do it on a kind of a zero budget. A lot of kind of the buzz in the industry is zero budgeting and all that kind of a thing, but that's that becomes a kind of a downer. So you have to get away from that. Make sure that you got enough funding to deploy, because that's what the senior leaders are in charge of, prioritization, okay, and investment. So that's what they do. The other thing is get the right skill set. You can't create a change management looking at the same old people who grew up in a very different world and ask them to relearn new skills. So if you really want to bootstrap, you go and hire people from different industries. I worked at a kind of the food company, and we went and hired from technology companies. Okay, they had no idea of how to sell a frozen food product, but they were digitally savvy, and they could drive the transformation.
Antonio, maybe a minute for you to, if you could just weigh in with your thoughts.
Yes, I'll give you an example. It's a really nice question. It's easy to make plans, very difficult to deliver them. So I'll give you an example, one of the last ones that I'm still suffering from it because it's very difficult. Number one, clear choices that you are sticking with a long time, not changing them. The last transformation, digital transformation I led in consumer goods had 3 choices. Transform the core products by making them smart, transform the core marketing activities by not talking about digital marketing, but a new marketing that was primarily digital, and look at digital commerce not as a new channel, but as a new business model. So very clear choices you make, and then you structure the choices and you stick with them. You keep the leaders. Luke said, keep the money, essential. If you pull the money, then nothing's going to happen. Keep leaders in place, keep the money in place. Don't change the choices because they take time to deliver, and then form end-to-end teams. Form end-to-end teams. These things don't get resolved by digital. Does not understand functions. Functions are a consequence of enterprise management styles. Digital is by nature end-to-end. So clear choices, leadership and money that sticks together, an end-to-end team, an end-to-end approach to the change. And good luck.
No, I think first of all, thanks a lot for that point, Antonio, and it's great to hear that. Unfortunately, we are at the end of the hour, and we, I think, have 4 or 5 more questions that have come in. So what we're going to do is we're going to relay these questions to the panelists, and we'll get their viewpoints and send it across by email to the people who have asked the question. So sorry that we'll not be able to take it. We're at the top of the hour. First of all, would like to thank each of the panelists wholeheartedly. First of all, sorry for putting you in a bit of a spot and crisis in the midst of another crisis, and thanks for staying on and going through this. Apologies that there was a bit of a disruption with me coming on board to very quickly do this. But thanks a lot for staying the course and sharing your views to the audience. Thanks a lot to all the attendees who also stayed on through this. Apologies for the interruptions internally that we had, but I'm glad that you could hear some of these audiences, and we can always reach out to them as well if you have other questions that they would like to answer. But look forward to seeing all of you in the next edition of this virtual panel series. And you all have a wonderful time. Stay safe, take care, and good luck, everyone. Thank you.
Hey, Krishna.
Thanks, Krishna. Thanks for the opportunity.
You did a great job of showing resilience in these difficult times.
Yeah, I know.
Thanks a lot,
Thank you.
Krishna.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.